Thank you very much. Well, I'll just give a quick introduction. Yes, today I'm playing a sustainable consultant. Actually, what we do in Oxford Sustainable is primarily development. So we've developed a number of sustainable projects and renewable energy during, well, more than 10 years in a number of different countries. So Estonia, Finland, the Netherlands, UK, different places. But the last few years, because we had been working in this field, a number of people asked us, okay, well, can we help with this sustainable advice? So we've got a section of the company which is also dealing with this sustainable advice now. I'm actually qualified in both BREEAM and LEED. So I suppose talking about this sustainable development is something within my competence. As we said, I'm also chairman of the Estonian Green Building Council, and Oxford Sustainable founded the Romanian Green Building Council about 7 years ago. So quite a bit of experience in this field. I hope to give some really practical information during this presentation, so some things that people can take away. So if there are any detailed questions about, exactly what does this cost, exactly how have you done it before, because I suppose at the moment I've got about 500,000 square meters of projects under development, throw the questions at me. The more difficult, the better. Everyone's here to get some knowledge. So, kicking off. I'm going to use the sustainable certifications as an idea to define sustainable building. Of course, there are many different ways to define sustainable buildings, and it's not only through sustainable certifications, but I'll explain why sustainable certifications are a good way to view it. We'll also be looking at why investors, developers want sustainable certifications. There's some trends, some costs of certifications as we've experienced it so far, and how to increase profit with certification. So hopefully all practical stuff which is useful for people. So as we've heard, I won't go into too much detail since from the last presentation we also heard about BREEAM and LEED. These are the two most popular ones. I think the key thing about this certifications is that they're quite useful because they're audited and they're third-party approved. So we've got an independent certification for this particular building at the moment. Everyone in most of the Baltic states talks a lot, and there's a lot of marketing. Our buildings are the highest quality, our buildings are the most energy efficient, our buildings are the most sustainable. But what the certification does give you is a proof for that, a third-party proof to say, well, yeah, actually we've achieved this level. So rather than just the developer or whoever it is talking themselves, you can see there's a third party, and the third party has actually agreed with their opinion. This is probably the most useful thing, I think, about the certifications for sustainable development. It is becoming more and more demanded by the market, as we've heard. Does it work? Yeah, we've got quite a few examples now, and luckily my figures are not so different from the figures in the last presentation in terms of how many buildings are being developed. A little bit different, but close enough. So yeah, we see that this has already happened in quite a few developments. And I've worked with my team on a number of quite large projects in the Baltics, like the Ülemiste Centre, different retail buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings. So we've got this experience from our own projects that we've developed, and also helping some others develop their projects. So why is it needed, actually? Can I use this microphone? Yeah.
Yeah, but the cameraman will not hear you. Please.
The cameraman won't hear me?
Yes.
I guess as long as the translator hears me, it's okay. If the cameraman doesn't hear me, it's probably not too big a problem. Okay, so why? How fast? What are the drivers? Actually, what's causing people to start with this sustainable certifications? From the last presentation, we had some ideas. I've written some other ideas. The first one, it's money. Actually, money is the main driver, of course, in this market, and the money is driving things from the investment side. So you have a number of large investment funds, Aberdeen Asset Management, Norwegian Pension Fund, and other developers who are actually saying, we want to do it. Why is the money saying we want to do it? The money is saying we want to do it largely because the pension funds are funded by your grandmother, your grandfather, and they're thinking, well, what about the future? What about the future for the children? What about the future of the planet? So people are thinking, well, we would like to invest in something sustainable. This might be a sustainable company, it might be a sustainable building. So the investment funds, because their clients are saying let's do something sustainable, say okay, that's good, we'll invest in something sustainable. So Aberdeen, for instance, say, well, we want to BREEAM our portfolio. We want to have only BREEAM projects in our portfolio, for instance, or only certified projects in our portfolio. So the money is actually one niche. There's also a Nordic Germanic influence. I mean, this you see, of course, here from the Germanic side. In the Estonia, you'll see a lot more from the Scandinavian side, where these countries are saying, well, we'd like to buy this type of project. I think in Lithuania, later I've got a point about Lithuanian examples, but I think Acropolis was a good example. I don't have that knowledge personally, but as I understood, the German investors decided to buy that project only after it was BREEAM certified. So here's a direct example of the certification leading to new money. Large international players and investors, as we've heard, large international clients, and the big tenants such as the Levi's and so on have social corporate responsibility policies, and they're also asking their teams in the different countries to locate in buildings which are sustainable or do things which are sustainable. Normally at the moment there's not one criteria that says you must locate in a certified building. However, if there's a choice, and the choice is being made at the management level, then having a sustainably certified building is another good argument for the team to locate in that building. So as we heard in the last presentation, perhaps in the Baltics at the moment, no one is saying we must locate in this building, but when you have two buildings of equal weight, of course you prefer to locate in a better building, certainly if it's the same price. So quite a few projects are in process, quite a few are planned, and we'll see these numbers in a minute. And quite a few big projects, actually. Here the numbers are more or less the same as the last presentation. So we've got a BREEAM lead. This is not projects, but it's certifications. So what it means, you can certify different parts of the project. For instance, you can certify the design part or the construction part or both with these different methodologies. So about 22 BREEAM 1s and 6, 20 and 7 in Estonia, 10 and 1 in Latvia. I saw there was a second lead one in Latvia now. I don't know what that one is, but okay, I'll hear from that later. So these statistics are about similar to what's happening in Europe. We see that about 75 to 85% of sustainable buildings in Europe are BREEAM, and about 25% are LEED. So these numbers, in terms of certifications, I suppose, are similar to the European standards, except in Finland. Finland's an unusual case where LEED has a lot more buildings than BREEAM, for whatever reason. So, what are the trends? What's driving this apart from the money? Well, basically, one large developer I worked with said directly to me, yes, what we're trying to do is we're trying to be more efficient. We're trying to create some kind of competitive advantage. And that is competitive advantage in terms of lower communal costs, in terms of improved building, in terms of better quality processes, in terms of more efficient operation. Why? Because then they can actually offer a lower price to their tenants. It might be a lower total price. So we'll see in a later slide, I'll give an example where you could have in Riga, for instance, a €2 increase in the rental income you receive. This is a pretty high amount, but if you can think that you could save something like that on your communal costs, for instance, then the tenant will pay the same, or maybe you can set it up so that this €2 is split, the tenant saves €1, so your building is €1 less than the competitors, and you also gain €1 because there's €1 you get back from the communal costs. So there are actually ways to think about this in terms of the money, how we can do that efficiently, how we can save money for the tenant, and how we can also make more money. Then it's, sorry for the classic win-win, but yeah, everyone can get some kind of advantage from it. So I suppose the idea behind this trend is thinking a bit more cleverly. Thinking new, I'm not going to be so positive in terms of recommending all of these new things, try out all sorts of new things. I'm rather going to say, no, stick with what already works. But think about it a bit more cleverly, how we can use this for our benefit and for the benefit of the tenants or the owners in the building. quite many buildings are being assessed, as we saw in Finland. In Scandinavia it's hundreds, in the Baltics it's tens, but this is only going to increase, I think. Various developers are setting the same standards and saying, well, we want to do this, we want to go in this direction. So NCC, for instance, announced, okay, it will certify all of its buildings, so this is quite a strong strategic statement. And the other companies are starting to green their portfolio, so they're starting to certify existing buildings or to use certifications on the new buildings. So it's happening. This, although we're here and it's still new in the region, this is really something which is happening and it's going to continue happening. Within Baltic Europe, what difficulties? Well, there is one misunderstanding that sustainable buildings must be more expensive than non-sustainable buildings. It doesn't have to be. Yes, of course it can be. If you're going to bang on lots of fancy technology, it'll be more expensive. But there are ways to get certain levels of certification which are not more expensive. And I'll show some numbers in a minute how that could be done. There's a lower margin in Baltic countries. Certainly, from the last slide we compared Finland to the Baltics, and of course Finland's got a nice juicy margin. They make a nice amount of profit on their projects, a lot more than we do here in the Baltics. So this is a reason to be able to try out new things. They've got more flexibility to try something interesting. In Norway, even more. There's less margin, so therefore people are less interested to try something which you could say is new, such as this certification, because there might be a risk. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. At the moment, those who have tried it are a little bit more innovative, a little bit more creative, a little bit more forward-thinking. The lack of profitability within the region, as we know, of course, means there's less investment in training, in knowledge building, and so the awareness of this sustainable certifications is lower. This is also a limit on the development of sustainable certifications. Louder. Yeah, okay. I'll come a bit closer to the microphone then. Many clients are actually not aware of the real benefits and costs, so that's another question of awareness, which the Green Building Councils are working on. So in Estonia, in Latvia, and Lithuania, one of our main tasks is to raise the awareness so people do know really what is the benefit and what are the costs of sustainable buildings. And there's many misunderstandings, as I said earlier. Everyone claims we have the best building, we have the most sustainable building, we have the most energy efficient building. So people don't really know, what does it mean, what is sustainable then? And there's a lot of skepticism, of course. It depends on the national culture, but actually there's a lot of wait and see. Let's see if this other guy falls on his face first, but if he succeeds, maybe we'll do it as well. Luckily, we've gone over this process, and we're now to the point where people can see, yeah, some of these projects are doing okay. So hopefully we're getting past this wait and see phase. So the lack of knowledge means that changes are coming through legislation rather than being industry-led. Of course, in the GBC, the Green Building Councils, we're about the industry and industry-led change. Normally, industry-led change is better than government-led change because you don't want to be forced to do something. You rather would like to create your own framework so that you can do it. Academically, as I said, the more forward-thinking companies are starting to do this. And at the moment, this is us here on the last line. There is a small amount of information elite who really have this knowledge of what the benefits of it are. We heard from the first presentation that this group has the knowledge, and through the knowledge they can actually increase the profitability of their companies, which is true. At the moment it's a small group and we can all benefit from this. So we still have this first mover advantage because there are not so many sustainable buildings. In a few years we're going to be in a situation where there are many, but the corollary of this is that yes, we now have the competitive advantage. However, the companies that are not choosing to go sustainable at the moment will then be to some degree locked out of this profitability in the future. So it means if they're not building in all the sustainable technologies, if they're not building in the legislative changes which are coming, if they're not thinking ahead, in about 5 years' time, they will suffer. Yes, you can certify your building 5 years later, but it's not the same type of certification. It doesn't mean that all of the benefits are built into the building. Now you've got the chance to build this future profit into your building. If you don't do it, you'll be locked out of that profit, and that's a risk. So, sustainable projects by building type in the different regions, and this is quite different. I mean, offices are the largest in the different regions. However, we have some industrial in Lithuania. Estonia has got a bit more in terms of the retail, the residential. Latvia's got retail and residential as well. So you see a little bit of a difference in the different countries, but I guess when we get more and more projects coming online, then this will even out, and we should have round about the same type of split of projects across the different areas. So, what change? Slowly, this change is happening because more knowledge is coming onto the market, more people are becoming aware of it. There are more conferences such as these explaining what are the benefits, what are the costs, so you can get a real picture. You can say, well, okay, for that cost am I prepared to do it, or is that benefit enough? And you can make it an informed choice rather than not having the knowledge to make any choice. However, we still know within the market many consumers are saying, well, we just want the lowest cost, we just want the cheapest thing. So many developers, I'm sure, in the room are aware of the fact that it's sometimes difficult to build a quality product because lots of buyers come to you and say, no, yeah, this other development's cheaper, and they don't know that the walls are very bad, or that they'll be able to hear their neighbours, or that in a few years it'll need to be repaired because they don't have this expertise. So unfortunately, we have to still work with this market situation, but it is changing. I've seen with my own developments that people are more and more starting to think about the quality, and the price is less and less the only factor involved in this decision. And in my view, at some point we'll get this tipping point. So we've got a few sustainable developments now, and we've got a few quality projects going on, but there'll be a certain point where everyone will go from being skeptical to being believers. We haven't got there yet. We've still got a small number of believers and more skeptics, but it's moving in this direction. And at a certain point, everyone will be believers. And then, as we heard in the last presentation, yeah, probably most of the projects being developed will be sustainably certified or sustainable in some way. So, what's actually working practically? Practically, when you speak to engineers, architects, construction companies, they say, oh yeah, I just want to do it like I always did it, I'm not interested in any of this sustainable nonsense. What does it all mean? I don't want to do anything else. So inertia, the fact of companies and people wanting to do things as they always did it, is stopping the progress. It's some or many people say, well, it's just another difficulty, it's just another hassle, it's just something I want to avoid. You can look at it as a problem, but you can also look at it as a potential benefit, what I can get out of it rather than what does it cost me. That's a mindset question. There have been not so many examples to copy so far, so the first movers are the first movers, meaning in this region there are not so many good examples, but these are now coming online. It's been more difficult to get certificates from suppliers. So FSC is a wood certification, and there are these companies around who supply FSC wood to developments, but a lot of construction companies, even big construction companies, are not even aware of this and think that there are no companies. So this is a problem perhaps more in the mind than in reality. The exactness of auditing. You can't get around it, so you have a requirement and you've just got to fulfill that requirement. With municipalities, with others, you can normally negotiate a solution. With an audited requirement, you have to do exactly what it says there. You can't, if you are requested to provide a red dog, you can't provide a blue dog. So that's bad in a sense, but it's good in a sense, because I've seen in the Baltic region that if you don't have exact requirements, it's much more difficult to get people to know exactly what to do. Of course, you need more thinking. That's probably the main thing about the certifications. You don't need to necessarily spend a lot more money. Some more money perhaps, depends what you do, but you need to think a bit more. So you need to plan ahead, you need to make feasibility studies, you need to think what you're doing with your building. That's the most important. And thinking about the full life cycle. So it makes you think ahead and think, well, okay, how do I get lower operational costs so my building is more efficient, which is good for you. And the methodologies force you to do that to some degree. So, some costs, as we've seen them, for different types of buildings. Here, pass range, this is for BREEAM actually. Pass is the lowest level. You can use the methodology to get a more efficient process, and that's why you could potentially have a lower score. So if your development process is not very efficient, you can actually follow this development process and save some money. But you might have a very efficient development process, so you might not save some money. But anyway, the possibility is there. The Green Building Council assumed that LEED is more expensive than green in Estonia in any case. Maybe that changes as people become more aware of the different methodologies and how to implement them. But here you see you have pass, good, and I've just put the 3 highest levels on this slide: very good, excellent, outstanding. Very good, 1 or 2% maybe in terms of construction costs. Outstanding, maybe about 10% increase in terms of the projects. So what would I say? I would say at the moment, probably best not to go for this, because it's going to cost you a lot of money and you don't have a lot of margin here anyway. But go for something, maybe go for good, maybe go for very good, where it doesn't cost you too much and you should be able to get some good benefit from it. So my advice is always be practical about it. So, what about increasing the profit or savings? There's a good course that we've got in the GBC in Estonia about sustainable development and renewable energy. But anyway, you can use renewable energy as an income generation technique. So if you're clever and you think about it, don't bang on just technology, which is not going to generate you additional income. Think how I can get a higher income from adding that technology into the development. It's possible. We've made quite good figures from adding renewable energy into our sustainable development, so it's certainly possible to do it. Increased tenant income, as I gave an example where you can play around with the savings of the communal costs. Reducing the communal cost means you can increase your rental income, so there's some way to get more solid income yourself, and you pay less and the tenants pay less in terms of communals. You can also do some things with green leases, so you can have interesting lease agreements and arrangements with contracts so that you can get more income and the tenants end up either not spending more or getting more benefit. Reduce communal costs, certainly, good for everyone. Higher sales value, we see in the later slides examples of what those percentages can be, but certainly the statistics show across Europe we have higher sales values and higher transactional values and rental values, less in the Baltics, but I did a case study. Lower financing costs, not at the moment in the Baltics, but I'm working on that with banks in Estonia, so if you can save 0.5% on your mortgage, that's a lot of money you get back. Reduce replacement costs, so if there is less repair work to do, if you develop the building right, then this is also good for your operations. The increase in ROI. Now, what we see is, there are very different figures, but what we see here is the figures are all going in the right direction. I think that's more important. If this is 8% or 7% or 6% or 1%, it doesn't matter so much. The point is, the figures all go in the right direction. So I've seen very few examples, except for projects which have been just developed badly, where the result is worse. Normally the figures are always going in the right direction, so if you do it right, you should get a better financial result. And as you see, less energy use on average with these buildings, less water use, less solid waste, less greenhouse gases, and something which is very rarely considered is the productivity. Actually, if you consider the value of the salaries through the lifetime of the building, these are about 200 times the construction cost. So a small saving or a small increase in productivity is a great benefit for your tenants, and that feeds back to you. So actually this eventually feeds back into the price that you should receive for the building. And of course people do more work, which is a good thing. We had the example earlier about looking out on the greenery makes you work harder. There are some good statistics about this, and here are the numbers. So we're not so far advanced as Northern and Western Europe, but here's an example in practice. This is one of the projects I worked on with my team in Estonia. If we don't say that the Maastricht study says an average increase of 80% in transaction value, let's say that's way too much for the Baltics. Let's just say you can get a 1% increase in value. Considering it's in the centre, let's say it has a sale value of 100 million. It's more, but okay, let's say for now. Let's say the sustainable costs were 300,000, everything you needed to add to that building. You can do it for less. This was a big project. This was some 100,000 square meters, so there are more investments to make and so on. But just calculating this through, you've got 300,000 in terms of costs. If you get a 1% increase in the sales value on 100 million, that's 1 million. Left over is 700,000. So you've got a good return on investment. If you had a 18% increase, it would be a 6,000% return on investment, which is kind of crazy, of course. But let's not assume that. Let's just say you get a 1%, and you've got some 200% return on your investment in a sustainable building. These numbers are not created. Well, I mean they are because they're not exactly the numbers for Minister, but it's quite real. Let's say it in that way. This is quite a real example. So, what is the future vision? Obviously, you can get some quite large benefits financially, but also in terms of social and environmental benefits if you do this thing correctly. And the benefits are not only to you. I've focused on the benefits to you because everyone likes to hear about what are the benefits for me. But of course, there are benefits for the environment, there are benefits for society. Some of the developments that we're doing also consider things such as supporting local schools and job creation, as we heard in one of the first presentations. Yeah, we're doing this as well, so there can be benefits to the wider society if that interests you. But anyway, what we're saying in the GBC in Estonia is think about you and think about others. Don't only think about the rest of the world, but think what you can get from that in terms of benefit. And when that benefits someone else, great, then you both have a benefit. So it seems that there's quite a high risk of not going green because the trend is going in that direction. You might be locked out of property into the future. More and more projects are starting, and with BREEAM and some are with LEED as well. So my view, and in 5 years probably you've forgotten who I am, but if I'm still talking in 5 years, I'll stick my head above the parapet and you can cut it off. I think it will be very normal to have sustainable certifications in this region. And any questions?
You can use it, I'll use it. Yeah?
Yeah.
No worries. Perfect timing. Yeah, congratulations. Are you German? No?
No, I'm English, but I can speak with a German.
Okay, great. Right, we have a couple of questions. And have you had an example in your practice that to build a LEED or BREEAM certified project building actually costed less than just to build without any certification and without the standards? Just equivalent building without the standards?
I've had one residential building in the centre of Tallinn, which cost in total about 20,000 if I add on all of the costs for the BREEAM on top of a total cost of about $1 million. So it was a smaller building. So even with a smaller building, it's a small percentage. That was assessed in only the post-construction stage, so it wasn't using any benefits from the design stage. If we had been already doing that in the design stage, it would have been either zero or slightly lower cost. So I have one with like almost no cost, and if we'd done it slightly differently, it would have been the same or lower cost. So yeah, that's a practical example. Yeah.
Residential.
That was a residential.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. But it is possible that the certified building would cost less than just
and the idea
typical
is
one.
Because there can be a more efficient process.
Okay.
You won't get the highest score, so I don't say you'll get an outstanding score to cost less. No, you'll get the lowest score, which is the pass, but it depends which credits you choose and what things you're thinking about. Another example is the waste efficiency. The sustainable certifications require you to be more efficient with waste. If you can save on the waste costs, let's say you save 20% of the waste costs through being more efficient with the waste cost has a certain percentage impact on the total building. So again, this can save you money. If you think about reuse, here's a Humanist example, they save something like 200,000 euros from reusing the glass facades within the building. This is a real saving. In total, they spent more, but had they only chosen to go the lowest level, the pass level, had they only chosen to be efficient with the waste and efficient with the glass, then perhaps they would have saved 300,000 or 400,000 euros. So, yeah, they had higher ambition and they wanted to do more, but if you do only the basic things, and if you do only the things which save you money, you can save some money. I don't say it's easy, you really have to think about it, but yeah, it's possible to have a small saving at the lowest level.
Right. Thanks for that. The next question is, and the final question to you, what would you how would you advise the developers who, would say that, okay, I'll build according to the standards, but I will not certify the building. It will be equal to the BREEAM certified or LEED certified, but I will save money on certification. I'll just build upon the standards.
Great.
Go ahead, do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, no need to involve any consultants.
No. If you want to know, I mean, I've been talking about certifications at the moment, but the point is we're here to make this whole buildings more sustainable. There's many ways to go more sustainable. So yeah, why not? Of course, it's better to do.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.